And as we begin the 5th week of this Rashis and Signs class, we're going to take some time to look through and consider how each sign represents specifically to a chakra, and how the chakras are related to the zodiac in the sky. So we'll essentially be exploring our inner zodiac. Now, I do have a number of images to share with you, diagrams, but we'll get to that towards the second part of this talk. But before we dive a little deeper into the technicalities and the specifics, what we need to understand is what exactly is astrology doing when it comes to our karma, which is stored within our chakras. Now, we're starting to find out and understand that our bodies, our minds, that they hold on to information. And we're even starting to discover that within our genetic structure are stored experiences and traumas, anything that has not been processed from our genetic line, from our ancestry. And this is why we even have a particular chart in Vedic astrology, the Docile, which deals with things that are passed on genetically, if you want to think of it that way, from the ancestors. Although what we have to remember is that the chart itself, the whole entirety of the chart, is actually a reflection of our past karmas and the karmas of those that came before. So what we need to understand is that the choices we make, the way we think, the experiences that we have in life, that these are reflections of how information in the form of karmas, in the form of planetary energy, is stored within the body, is stored within our consciousness. And when I say consciousness, that is a word that gets thrown around a lot, just like the word God gets thrown around a lot. By consciousness, I simply mean that which you are. So your body consciousness, your mind consciousness. Consciousness is essentially everything, and everything is conscious. But some things are a little more or less aware of it, if you want to think of it that way. So awareness, that is an aspect of consciousness, but consciousness is the actual thing. So as you, an individual, a person, a mind, a history, a personality, that is just one conglomeration of certain aspects of consciousness. And again, this will be reflected within the birth chart, reflected within the chakras in the spine. And now we also have to consider, when we're talking about chakras, what exactly are we talking about? Well, there are numerous descriptions of chakras, with light and sounds, colors, images. You can get very heady about the whole thing. And what we have to remember is that the descriptions that we have of these chakras, they're metaphorical. They're there so that our minds can think about something in a way to kind of understand it. But the chakras themselves, whether you consider them energy centers, whether you consider them points of karmic storage, whatever it might be, our human minds, at least at this point in humanity's development, can't really fully understand the reality of things like the chakras. So we have to use words, we have to use ideas and concepts in order to get a sense of it, work with it a little bit. In the same way that we can have an idea of how the body works, which enables a person to walk across the room, pick up an instrument, and play the guitar, or whatever it might be. But when we get right down to it, the most fundamental building blocks of what makes that possible, our human minds really can't comprehend. We can talk about the surface layer of it, ideas, the concepts related to it, but the actual thing itself cannot be discussed. So we have to remember this about the chakras. Now, from this point forward, we'll understand that I will be using words to talk about these things, metaphorically speaking. But the actual reality of it's probably a little bit beyond, well, it's beyond me at least, maybe not you, but it's certainly beyond me, and I've been focusing on and considering it for a number of years. Now, why do I bring all these things up? Well, within the chakra system, there is an idea that our karmas are latent, or like seeds, and they're ready to express whenever the time is right. And astrologically, many people will say the time will be right when a certain progression comes along. The timing will be right when a particular dasha or planetary cycle runs. The time will be right when a transit occurs to trigger that. And all these things are accurate, and all these things are very helpful pointers and signs. But the chart is a snapshot of those karmas, those habits, those tendencies that you brought in at the moment of your birth. Like at that moment, what was the state of your consciousness? That is what the birth chart is essentially showing. It's showing the state of your chakras, the state of your energy systems, your reactions, your attachments, and your aversions. And that will be reflected by the placement of the planets within the chart. Now, after you are born, if you have any awareness whatsoever, if your consciousness is aware at all, you will start to interact with the world of form around you, which is really just an aspect of yourself. But again, we're just using words here to hopefully make some sense out of all of this. You begin interacting with the world. And when you interact with the world, there's feedback, meaning you push on something and it pushes back. You walk a certain way, you get to a certain point. You have a particular emotion in relationship to someone, they respond in kind. And as you continue through your journey, well, your consciousness starts to change a little bit. Now, if you were just on autopilot and following the dictates of what's reflected within the birth chart at the moment of birth, and you never make any changes, you never pay any attention, you never pay attention to any feedback, you never change based on someone giving you advice, or you never stick your hand on a hot stove and see that it's hot and realize, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. You just keep doing it. Well, if you're that, most people aren't like that. But what I'm trying to get at here is as you live your life, as you move forward through life, you become more aware of your consciousness, more aware of the karmas, the tendencies, habits, and patterns within you, reflected within you. And as you go through life, hopefully, by paying attention, you are altering and adjusting your course as you go. Now, some karmas stored within the system are extremely fixed. And by that, I don't mean fatalistically fixed. I mean, it's a habit that is so strong that it's nearly impossible to break without intense effort and willpower. All right. For example, when it comes to the yogic path, what's the biggest problem everyone has? Attachment to the body, attachment to the personality, attachment to who they think they are. And I don't care who you talk to in the yogic field, most people, that is the hang-up that they have. And why don't they experience elevated states of consciousness as they perceive it? Why don't they experience expansion of awareness? Because they are not able to let go of their identification with a self, a personality, the I, that individualized sense of self. Once you can let go of that, everything else takes care of itself. So this is why that's an extremely fixed karma, which is why most people who get involved in yoga and meditation, they'll calm their minds down. They'll be able to live a more pleasant life. They'll be more internally centered. But are they going to go all the way to complete liberation of consciousness? More than likely not, because it is the scariest thing in the world to give up that I. It's like me saying to you, you will be enlightened if you go over there in the corner and you put your head on that chopping block and you let me chop your head off. Some people would be all about that if it would work. But very few would actually get to the point of allowing that sort of thing to happen. That was an exaggeration, but it has that same kind of power, that same kind of fear. So all of our experiences, whether it's having bad relationships, bad finances, good relationships, being able to manage money well, things of this nature, all of those are dependent on how strong the karma is reflected within your birth chart, reflected within your energy patterns. Now, why is it so persistent? Because here's what most people do. They're going to have a difficult time with finances or with being emotionally centered and secure. And what happens is a lot of times throughout the year, transits occur which are going to keep triggering those karmas. Something will happen. You'll feel emotionally insecure. You'll feel like the world's falling apart and you can't protect yourself. Or something will happen and all of a sudden a big bill comes your way. And you're like, geez, I'm in debt again. And because that karma is stored within you and you haven't attended to it, every time a transit comes along, and it can be even a little transit, it's going to trigger the experience. You're going to freak out again. You're going to make a bad decision and you're going to reinforce that karma. I discussed this, I believe, in the last chapter of the book Kriya Yoga Vichara, about how karma is like a feedback loop. A feedback loop. And if you have a musical instrument, those of you who are a musician, and let's say you've got a guitar, and the volume is up on your amplifier fairly loud, and you're trying to play, and you turn towards the amplifier, and the sound from the speaker hits the guitar, makes the guitar vibrate, which in turn makes the sound louder, which goes to the speaker, which makes the speaker louder, which then goes back to the guitar, makes the guitar louder, until you have this ear-piercing squeal. It's no fun. Of course, there's controlled feedback, which is a lot of fun. But when it's out of control, all you're doing is busting the eardrums of everyone around you and yourself. And that's like our karma. A person gets angry. They go and they do something that makes another person angry. They get in a fight. The anger grows. They still don't get it satisfied because they don't resolve the anger until eventually they're exhausted, and that goes back to a seed state again. Another time period comes along where it gets triggered. The anger arises. It just turns into another feedback loop where they get angry at the world reflects that back to them, they get even angrier, and so it keeps going. And that is one of the difficulties with our karma, is that it's such a strong feedback loop that most people don't know the way that you end that feedback loop is the same way you end the feedback loop with a musical instrument. You either turn the volume all the way down, which is essentially like turning your reaction all the way down, or you turn away from the source of the sound, so therefore the feedback doesn't keep happening. And essentially that's like saying to a lot of people, be docile, as some people are known to say, turn the other cheek. Well, that's following the pattern of how you resolve karma. You can do things such as turning away from it, removing yourself from the situation, or taking action in a different direction. And so it's not always you have to be meek and say, all right, this bad thing's happening, so I'm just going to let it happen and that's that. Because it may be that what your real need is to not just remove yourself from the situation, but now change the way you think about things. Do something different. Try to act in a different way until you create a new type of pattern. So ideally, until we're ready for complete and utter liberation of consciousness, our goal is to create patterns that are supportive of harmonious life on this earth. Once we are able to do that, then we can do things like withdraw our awareness so totally that whatever happens, happens and we're fine with that. But again, that's why, for example, in the practices of yoga and meditation, we work from a level of, okay, I've got a problem, I'm unhappy, let's fix it through meditating, through practicing yoga, number one. And then we start feeling good, and our next step is, all right, now I can accomplish things, I can do things, I can be a part of this world in a very fulfilling way. And so there's that aspect of it. And then the final result, though, is to let go of all of that. So first of all, you overcome the difficulties. You overcome what you call the bad things. Second of all, you start cultivating the good things. And then the final step is actually letting go of it all. All right, but we have to go through the stages first, typically for most people. So anyway, this is a theory of karma for you to consider. And the reason we're tying this into the Zodiac is because it's very important to understand how humanity and you, as an individual, are related to the cycles of time. All right. Now, every year, the Earth goes around the sun. Every year, the Earth goes around the sun. And as that happens, it looks like the sun is moving through the Zodiac. And we know from our previous classes that the Zodiac is the path in the sky, the apparent path of the sun from the Earth. Okay, so if we track that through the sky throughout the year, that will give us the belt of the zodiac, which is where our planets fall. They fall along that line about 9 degrees on either side of it. And it's a cyclical pattern based on the movement of the sun. Now, in the Indian traditions, there's something we call Uttarayana, which is when the sun starts moving from our perspective on the Earth, from the South Pole up to the North Pole of the planet. From the South Pole up to the North Pole of the planet. And you might have already read a little bit about this on the Asheville Vedic Astrology website under the Tropical and Sidereal Zodiac Debate blog discussion. But if not, I'm going to go over it here. So this starts on the winter solstice. And now, let's think about this astronomically. Every year, the Earth goes around the sun. And what it looks like from our perspective is that the sun is moving south, meaning it's moving towards the southern hemisphere. And then it stops, of course. And then it moves back north again to the northern hemisphere. Every year it does this. This is why we have summer in the northern hemisphere at the time we do. And that's why we have winter in the southern hemisphere when the northern hemisphere has summer. So they're reversed. But many people think about the zodiac and astrology and say things like, well, if it's seasonally based, how does that make sense? We can kind of see how it makes sense in the northern hemisphere. Because, for example, when we have the sun in Libra or Scorpio, that makes sense because we're moving towards harvest. And there's a particular kind of energy, an internalization of energy that occurs once we start getting into Scorpio. When we get the sun in Capricorn and Aquarius, Saturn-ruled signs, that makes sense too. Because in the northern hemisphere, it's wintertime, it's cold. Saturn rules over death, the darkness, the cold. And that's when it's as dark as it can get in the northern hemisphere. However, it doesn't make sense in the southern hemisphere. And this is problematic, and this is one of the reasons why many scientists and whatnot discuss how astrology can't really be an accurate, valid thing. But again, in our earlier classes in this semester, we have discussed what the constellations actually are, what the zodiac signs actually are, and that they're not actually related due to the size of each and so on. But anyway, back to the point. So we notice this path of the sun. And as you'll see in our future images I have to share, that it's not that astrology is seasonally based. It's that it is based on the evolution of human consciousness, human awareness, maybe I should say, throughout the year. And first of all, let's break it down in a few little pieces here. There is Uttarayana, which is called essentially like the northern way or the northern path of the sun. As we've discussed, that begins at the winter solstice, December 21st, around that time. And from that point forward, that's the darkest day that we can have in the northern hemisphere. All right. But the sun then starts moving northward on the globe from that point forward until we get to summer, again in the northern hemisphere. The summer in the northern hemisphere, we have the longest day possible. That's because the sun is as far north as it can get. And in between there, we have the spring equinox and so on. Now, once we get to that, what we call the summer solstice here in the northern hemisphere, at that point, the sun then starts going back south again. So it's going back down towards the South Pole, which means it's starting to move such that eventually, sometime in the next few months, the southern hemisphere is going to go through spring and then summer and fall and winter and so on. Now, think about this. The sun is moving from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere, from December 21st or thereabouts to around June 20th, 21st, and so on, depending on the calendar. And then from that point, it's moving back south again. Okay, back south again. So what do we see here is that the sun is going up the globe and then back down the globe, all right, from southern to northern. And again, Uttarayana, the northern path of the sun. Dakshinayana is when it's moving from north to south. Now, traditional Indian calendars, for some reason, don't start counting this until 2 to 3 weeks after it's happened. But it actually happens on the solstice. It's provable. You can prove it with a sundial. There's an irrefutable fact. All right, it happens on the solstices when these changes occur. It doesn't happen weeks later. Now, it is said that if a yogi dies or a person dies when the sun is moving from the South Pole to the North Pole, that is auspicious. And it is said that it is a bit inauspicious if someone dies when the sun is moving from the North Pole to the South Pole, because this is mimicking the energy of the life force circulating through our spine. Lower chakras are the South Pole. Higher chakras are the North Pole. And it's said that the North Pole is the realm of the Devas, or the Sattvic enlightened beings. And the South Pole, down below there, is the realm of the Asuras, or the worldly, demonic beings. So when you die, when the sun is moving from the South Pole to the North Pole, well, that's indicating that the life force within your body is moving up through the spine to your higher chakras. If you die or take your Mahasamadhi or whatever it might be, when the sun is moving from the North Pole to the South Pole, that's like the energy descending back down through the chakras, so moving back down into attachments within the world. All right. So now we see this, we understand this. Each chakra is represented by 2 signs. There is a masculine or positive polarity of that chakra, and a negative and feminine polarity to each chakra. So in just a minute we'll get to those diagrams so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But in the human, on a daily basis, this energy circulates through the spine. It goes from the positive to the negative, to the positive to the negative, and weaves up through the spine. Just like we see those images or ideas of like the serpents or the helix, the double helix of the Eda and Pingala Noddings as it goes up through the spine. So this is reflected within how the zodiac is expressed and set up. And so that's why, for example, in the Path of Kriya Yoga, or any kind of energetic enlightenment path which is circulating life force through the spine, what that's doing is it's bringing attention to those chakras, and it's bringing life force and awareness and pure consciousness, if you want to think of it that way, to those chakras. And every time you circulate that life force through the spine, it neutralizes or starts to burn out or bleach out those karmic seeds indicated by your birth chart. So this is why things like meditation are so important. Now, you can do it mechanically, and you can do it in such a way where you are just going through the motions, and that's going to have some help to balance out your nervous system. That's going to have some help to calm you down a little bit. But it's not necessarily going to be progressive and what a lot of people might consider to be enlightening unless you actively engage the process. Which means you learn that as you circulate life force through the spine, that you are putting your attention on each chakra as you pull it up through that spine. And if thoughts, memories, emotions, triggers come up, you're not supposed to go in there and pick them apart and find out what's this all about. You're supposed to bring your attention to it and then release it. Release your attachment to it. And every time you do that, that's like, if you need to clean paint off a deck. Well, first you put on some paint remover, you let it bubble up a little bit, and then you get the hose out and you power wash it off. Well, when you're doing these kinds of meditations and techniques, that's like putting the paint remover on there. All right. But then you have to use your willpower and your consciousness to use the power washer to get it out of there. Now, this is a lot of reasons why, when it comes to the path of Kriya Yoga and these energetic paths, that you'll see people doing these things for years and years and years, and they never really seem to get any clearer. They never really seem to get any more healthy-minded. They just seem like they're spending a lot of time sitting down and breathing. It's because they've been taught a technique, but they have not either figured out or been shown how to actually deal with, integrate, and release attachment to those karmas. Okay, and this is the key. Now, we're not going to go over that in this class. If you want to explore that, you need to find a teacher who specializes in those things. At Asheville Vedic Astrology, I do have a downloadable Kriya Yoga course under the Learn Kriya Yoga tab to get you started. Now, that's to get you started. That's not getting into these in-depth processes like we're talking about. You have to do some groundwork first. But anyway, this is why attention in meditation is so important, but it's also why attention in life is so important. Not just trying to escape from things, escape from your daily job, the stress and whatnot, and say, I can't wait to get home and meditate, or take a hot bath, or whatever it might be. You actually have to attend to and deal with things as they arise, because that's exactly the same as doing them subtly in meditation practice. Now, why is this? We've already discussed how the sun moves from the South Pole to the North Pole, and from the North Pole to the South Pole. Now, that means every year, every human being on this earth is having their life force or their prana ascend up through the chakras and then descend back down. So that's why a lot of people every year go through similar patterns. Maybe they get depressed in February. Maybe they catch a cold every third week of January. You know, these sorts of things. Maybe they get in a fight with their spouse every December. Because throughout the year, as these energies circulate, naturally, life is going to happen to present to you opportunities to become aware of and integrate and release attachment to certain karmas. So part of the whole path isn't about getting away from everything. It's about getting in there and looking at what's happening and saying, all right, here I am. Now, what am I going to do and how am I going to deal with it? You know, how am I going to use my God-given willpower to now affirm that this is something that I want to be free from, or I want to put more attention towards a state of present moment awareness. I don't want to necessarily be dealing with this stuff all the time. So every year, every human being, whether they're spiritual or not, and it's all the same thing really, they're going through this process. And the more they are aware as the process happens, and they attend to it when something arises, then they are working with their karma right then and right there, right in the present moment, immediately. Now, this is why practices like Kriya Yoga have been developed, because it allows you to go through the process in an accelerated rate. So if you are just living your life and you live to be 86, we've gone through 86 circulations of this life force through your spine and back down. That's good. That can get you quite a long ways if you're paying attention. It can get you all the way if you're really paying attention. But if you practice things like circulating life force through the spine and you do it intelligently, well, every time with effort that you circulate that life force through the spine, that is like living 1 year of healthy, stress-free life, and so that you can release these karmas. So doing it well, you can, in a sense, let go of your attachment to astrology. Because now you're working within the realm of present moment awareness, freedom, dealing with what is right there in front of you, which is what you're supposed to be doing anyway. And you can live your life as a creative being within this world, as a co-creator within this world, not as someone being pushed around by all the stored traumas and difficulties and issues and attachments and aversions that most of us have, which again is reflected within our birth chart. Now, for the gifted astrologer, who is able to look at the zodiac and see it as a chakra system, which you will be able to do by the end of this talk, hopefully, you can see where the planets are placed. You can see how each sign is Rossi aspect, and a sign is going to be, remember, a positive or negative polarity of one of the chakras. You can see how that chakra is going to be supported, maybe by gentle planets, Jupiter and Mercury, or how there's going to be an issue that the person's going to have to work out, let's say aspects from Saturn, Mars, or Sun ruling the 12th house, things of this nature. Or the placement of Rahu, Ketu are extremely important because where they are placed in relationship to the signs that represents the person's chakra in which they're influencing, which is showing where a person needs balance based on the nature and quality of that chakra. So now again, I'm not going to go into chakra theory, because I'm sure you have your own ideas about it, and I'm sure you can avail yourself of the knowledge from other places. I am working on a book on yogic healing, on a yogic healing city, how to develop that, again, for the benefit of others, not just to have a city, where we will briefly go into the chakras and how to understand those, but that might be a few months before that comes out. So, now, we know that each sign is a section, one of the sides of each chakra, the masculine or feminine or positive or negative polarity of a chakra. Now, it is the Rossi aspects, so go back and review previous classes on this. It's the Rossi aspects that show us what is the natural state of that chakra. All right, is it being supported or is it being hurt? Because remember, the signs are like the field in which our life grows and thrives. And so Rossi aspects to those signs will show what is the nature or state of that field. When we put a seed in that field, is it going to grow well or poorly? So how fertile is that field? And that will be determined by the nature of the Rossi aspects. Now the Lord of the sign, the state of the Lord of the sign, is going to show us how are we typically going to actually consciously work with that indication. Okay? Meaning if we're talking about our heart area, ruled over by Venus, Taurus and Libra, and we see that Venus is debilitated in Virgo, well, that's a key indication that we are probably not going to make good choices in relationship to things that support our self-value and self-love and capacity to interact with the world in a fashion which is mutually loving towards both the self as well as the projection from the self. That's because of how Venus is situated. Now maybe Venus is getting delighted by its friends, so that Venus is getting some help. But again, that's based on the Logitati Avashtas, which we're not necessarily going to get to in this particular semester. So the signs themselves, the influences, the planets in the sign, the Rossi aspects of the sign, that shows the field. What is it growing out of here? The planets are showing us how are we, what is the state of our current consciousness, our current habits, like actual active habits, those things that we are going to do or not do, or refrain from, which will show how are we going to activate or work within the realm of that chakra. So let's say you've got great, gentle Rossi aspects to the heart chakra. Well, that shows you're born into maybe a family or a situation that is supportive of things related to the heart chakra. But let's say the Lord of your heart chakra is great enemy sign, debilitated, whatever it might be. That shows that you yourself are probably going to throw away a lot of that or not understand how to best maximize it. And we see that all the time. Let's take people who inherit a lot of money. They've been born into a family where their second chakra, we'll just say, which is ruled over by Jupiter, Sagittarius and Pisces, is well supported. Maybe Jupiter's there. Maybe Mercury's in his own sign, Rossi aspect. Great initial, you're born into wealth or having the capacity to have a lot of wealth. But then since maybe there's some negative Logitati Avashtas on Jupiter, that can show where a person is going to get tripped up in dealing with their wealth, in dealing with their capacity to have positive exchange of energy with other people. So the person botches it up because the indicator of wealth, that Jupiter, is not necessarily acting in its best interests. So hopefully this is making sense. You understand where I'm coming from. So this is why the Rossi aspects are so important. This is why the planetary aspects are so important, because they give you a different layer, a different level of understanding in relationship to a person's development. And if you have someone that can hear you, and if you can see it yourself, then you can say to yourself, all right, I'm going to be aware of this, and now I'm going to work with it in such a way that I am actively choosing a different path. Okay, so we always have to remember this, that there isn't fate, there are choices. And even if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. And that will be reflected in your life and your life experiences. But having choice is difficult. It's not easy. Sometimes it's easy because your chart shows that there's going to be natural support in that area. So you think, I made this choice, and see how easy that worked out? And you say to yourself, well, why can't the rest of my life work out that great? Well, it's because you need to look at the Rossi aspects to the chakras indicated by the sign. You need to look at the Lord of the sign to see how are you going to actually work with it. You know, in the same fashion, just to finish this example, and you've heard these things before, if you've taken any classes with me, maybe there are bad Rossi aspects to Pisces and Sagittarius, which shows that you're born maybe into poverty, possibly. This is just a theory because there's so many other variables within a chart that we have to weigh it all together. But just for the sake of discussion, go with me on this. And so you're born into poverty. But let's say your Jupiter is exalted. Wonderful Jupiter. Now you're born into poverty, but since your consciousness is so geared towards working on that, you end up growing out of poverty into being a very wealthy individual. So this is why we see that the field one is born in, the activity one takes, there's many, many different variables that can be, or variations I should say, combinations of how that can work out in every area of your life in relationship to every chakra, essentially. So we have to keep all these things in mind as we're exploring the idea of the zodiac and the chakras. And I actually consider the tropical zodiac to be the more yogic zodiac. And of course everyone's going to throw a fit when they hear me say that. But to me it makes sense. In my understanding of yoga, it seems to me that we're not trying to escape the world, as everyone likes to believe, but we're learning to be in harmony with the rest of us, which is related to nature. You can learn from nature everything you need to know. You don't need a guru, you don't need a teacher. If you can pay attention to nature and how nature works, you will learn so much. And so it is the tropical zodiac that reflects that natural movement of the sun from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. It cannot be disputed. Anyone can measure it who's got a sundial. And that is the direct correlation between the sun, the soul, the purest jiva we can imagine, and the earth, our body, our form, our life experience. So whether you choose to use the sidereal or the tropical zodiac, that's completely up to you. And if you're a good astrologer using any zodiac, well, that's wonderful. So this is not an argument, as I've been prone to do in the past. This is just a description showing how natural it is to follow the sun's movement and how naturally that relates to the actual chakras within our body. Based on yogic philosophy, again, the idea of when one takes one's mahasamadhi, when is a good time to die, and seeing how it matches up visually within nature. Now, as we'll see in these descriptive images, we'll go over briefly and discuss briefly how, for example, the sun being in Aries, what kind of energy that has in relationship to human development. Not based on seasons, but based on what's going on when the sun is actually in Aries. It's in the third chakra in Aries. But what's going on when it's in Scorpio? That's when the sun is moving southerly. It's moving down, back to the base again, back to the realm of the Asheras. And when we see that, we will start to understand and be able to comprehend how the ascending energy that moves up through us, both internally as well as in relationship to the planet, reflects the particular signs that the sun goes through. And then when the sun's moving back downward, moving back down through the chakras, how those chakras, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricorn all reflect and really illustrate what I consider to be poetically that movement of energy back down the spine and showing a person's evolution throughout life and throughout the year. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to the images, discuss those images so you have some visuals to see what we're talking about here. We've discussed how the movement of the sun relates to the movement of the energy through the chakras. Now, you've probably seen this image before, especially if you've read any articles that I've written on this topic. But what we see here, the circle represents the sun, and the sun's influence between Capricorn and Cancer. Now, we know with the tropical zodiac that it is not delineated by constellations. It is delineated by the movement, the path of the sun. And so this is one of the reasons why many sages have said things like they have learned astrology from the sun. It doesn't necessarily have to mean the sun came down in its radiant avatar form. It could mean the person actually sat outside, contemplated and studied the path and movement of the sun, and was able to understand and assess these things, because nature can communicate in this way. So here's the sun. So now, when the sun is at tropical Capricorn, the beginning of tropical Capricorn, that is the winter solstice. That is when the sun is low and as close to the South Pole as possible, which is very similar, the South Pole being the bottom of your spine. We can think of it like this. So the Earth is like a body, and we are growing out of that body, a reflection of that body as well. And then from the time that the sun enters Capricorn, it's the first chakra area, it's starting to move up through the second chakra, third chakra, fourth, fifth, sixth chakra, all related to the zodiac signs we'll see here in the next image, or second to next image, until it reaches as far north as it's going to get in relationship to the Earth and the North Pole. So when the sun is way up here, here it is again, that's when the sun enters tropical Capricorn, the point of the summer solstice, when the sun is as far north as it's going to get. So it's like the light of the sun, the light of pure consciousness, which the sun represents, is way up here in the sixth chakra, influencing the sixth chakra, which we know is often representative of clarity of awareness, enlightened understanding, things of this nature. So we're bringing that soul light up into the higher chakras. Now, from the time of the beginning of Cancer, it starts to move downwards. Then it's going back through the sixth, the fifth, the third, second, first, and so on, fourth, in the proper order, of course, until it comes back down to where it started, towards the South Pole. And now we have the light of the sun closer to the South Pole, closer to the bottom of the spine, the first chakra. So this is one of the reasons why we can start to see the idea that the zodiac is not necessarily seasonally related. Coincidentally, it relates to the seasons in the North Pole, or excuse me, not the North Pole, but the Northern Hemisphere. But it won't do that in the Southern Hemisphere. However, it will, as we'll see, relate to the ascension of life force up through the spine, up through the chakras, and the evolution of our human consciousness throughout the year. Now, this is a artist's interpretation of the chakras. Again, we have a root chakra, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and a seventh chakra. Now, it's important to note that the zodiac only covers 6 chakras. And why is that? Because the seventh chakra is beyond form. It's beyond the unconscious body of Vishnu. So it makes sense that karmas are only going to be able to affect and stick to these lower chakras. And each chakra is going to relate to a different kind of experience and different kind of karma. And that's why certain planets are exalted in particular signs and debilitated in other signs, because certain planets, based on what their goal is, what their mission is, work better in particular chakras. You know, for example, if we take Mars and we consider where is it exalted? Well, it's exalted in Capricorn, in the root chakra. And people can think, why does that make sense? Well, the root chakra is a chakra that deals with meeting our basic needs, our survival, forming of the body, things of this nature. And what does Mars do? Well, Mars is that active energy which goes out and essentially takes what it needs so that it can survive. It is the fighter, it is the warrior. So you can contemplate these things. Think about where are the planets exalted, where are they debilitated. Think about how you understand the nature of the chakra. Even do research on the chakras so that in your mind you can start to paint this picture for yourself of how the chakras are related. Maybe we'll do a longer series or video at some point specifically on the relationships of planets to chakras. For example, if we think about the planet Venus, well, Venus is exalted in the second chakra. Now, it's in Jupiter's sign, but the second chakra deals with Pisces and Sagittarius. Now, it's exalted in the passive or negative polarity, Pisces, that portion of the second chakra. And why would it make sense for Venus to be exalted there? Number one, the sign of Pisces deals with complete and utter liberation, moksha. And Venus deals with love. Venus deals with sexuality, losing oneself. And if you think about it, this might be more true for women than it is for men, but for a woman to enjoy herself sexually, isn't it better if she feels totally free and unrestrained and there's no fears going on? Well, that's a 12th sign, Pisces-related influence. If we think about also the fact that the second chakra deals with procreation, creativity, and children and so on, well, wouldn't our children be so much more naturally beautiful if we had children out of the sheer inspiration rather than to fulfill some need that we need met? Wouldn't it be great if our creativity was completely unbounded and filled with such love that Venus brings? What kind of expression, what kind of art is created in that kind of space, in that kind of feeling, in that kind of atmosphere? Well, that's going to be reflected by the fact that Venus is exalted within this second chakra. Venus is exalted in Pisces. So if you sit down and contemplate and think through, what do the chakras mean? What do they represent? What are they related to? And you sit down and you think about what the planets deal with. What are they related to? It'll become very clear as to why, at least in regards to this particular theory, that the planets are exalted and debilitated where they are. Again, maybe we'll have to get into that for another longer talk, because it's well worth considering. Now, here is the astrological chart. I went over this, I believe, in the first week of classes. And those of you hopefully already know what this is about, but we know that in this chart, this box is always Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Those boxes will always be those signs. Now, if we understand the chakras, we know that the first chakra is ruled over by Saturn, which deals with Capricorn and Aquarius. So this section here is the first chakra, related to the first chakra. The next chakra, we keep going out, is related to Sagittarius and Pisces, related to Jupiter. That's the second chakra. Third chakra is Aries and Scorpio, related to Mars. Fourth chakra is Taurus and Libra, related to Venus. Fifth chakra is Gemini and Virgo, related to Mercury. And sixth chakra is related to the moon and the sun, Cancer and Leo. And we've discussed why there's no seventh chakra astrologically, because astrology does not apply to seventh chakra issues. Now we can see how this is laid out. And what's really fascinating is that if you ever study the Rossi aspects and consider how they work, you'll see a pretty interesting pattern formed. Now this came from a video I did a long time ago. It's somewhere on the youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology channel on Rossi aspects. But this illustrates the relationship between influences between the signs in regards to Rossi aspects. Now again, go review that video because I've gone over it in the YouTube channel. I've also gone over it in this previous class, how they function, how they work. But you'll see that the arrows are pointing to the direction in which the energy flows. So for example, in the dual Rashis, the dual signs, energy will flow between them, both ways, both directions. Within the active Rashi, we'll just use Aries here as an example, we'll follow the red, we'll see the arrow points to the fixed signs. So the arrow flows from the active to the fixed signs. With the fixed signs, we'll see with this yellow, related to Scorpio, that the energy flows from the fixed signs to the active signs. All right, now, this by itself, I remember one time talking with Ernst Wilhelm about it, and he said, if you just contemplate this, he says, this will reveal so much to you about how astrology works. And so I took him up on it, and I spent time at my computer drawing out these boxes and drawing out all the lines, individually and all together, just to see, well, what comes about from all these things. And if we map this out, this would give a description of how the energies flow through the chakras within our system, like the natural flow. If we could map out the chakras and how the energies flow between them, based on how the arrows are directed, would give you an indication here. For example, from the first chakra, the positive aspect of the first chakra. And why do I say the positive aspect? Because this is an odd sign. Well, it can flow directly to the passive polarity of the sixth chakra, all right, from fixed to active. We see the same thing here. We have the negative polarity, or the feminine aspect of the sixth chakra. And why is that? Because this is an even sign flowing to the active, or that's probably not the right word to use, let's just say the positive polarity of the sixth chakra. And why is that? Because since Cancer and Leo represent the feminine and masculine aspects of the sixth chakra, it's the odd-numbered sign which shows the masculine or positive polarity of that sign. And this can also be used to get a sense of, well, if you want to change something within your life, within your chart, if you follow the chutes and the ladders, it will give you an idea of how to do it. And what do I mean by that? We're just going to hint at it just because it's not part of our discussion today. But let's say that Capricorn actually happens to be your 10th house, okay, the house of career. All right. Now, what we want to work on or consider is, well, we can just go right in there and change the 10th house of career, but what is contributing to our experiences, the field within this 10th house, the actual foundation of it? Well, it's going to be anything related to the fixed signs that are Rashi aspecting to it, because it is the planets within the fixed signs that are sending their planetary energy to the field, to the fertile ground of Capricorn, which would be your 10th house, that is setting the foundation, the tone for that 10th house. So if you have any planets in Taurus, any planets in Leo, any planets in Scorpio, and you're having problems with whatever house Capricorn is in, you might want to consider, well, what is the nature of the planets within these signs, and how can I activate their higher nature? Remembering that every planet has a higher and lower nature. So, if it's Mars, does it mean I need to take more initiative within my work or whatever it might be? If it's Saturn, does it mean I just have to learn to do the tedious work and to endure through the difficulties? If it's Mercury, do I have to improve my capacity to communicate? If it's the Moon, do I have to be more adaptable? So this is just one way that if you study this and the interchanges between the Rashi aspects within this chart, and this is why I love this style chart so much, it'll give you a pretty clear indication of, number one, how the energy flows through each chakra, the energy system within the body, as well as, if you understand how to read the chart and you know what the planets mean in each sign, and you know what houses are involved, you can follow the energy, see what's contributing to the field based on the Rossi aspects, and then whatever planetary energy is being contributed to it, ask yourself, am I working with that in the highest or lowest way? Am I being a problematic Mars, where I'm picking fights where I shouldn't, where I'm causing friction for myself? Or, can I tune into the higher aspect of it? And every planet has one of those. And that is something that will make a lot more sense as we get through the bhavas and houses class, as well as the planets and grahas class, both of which are coming up further into the year. So for now, this is just like I've been discussing throughout each class. This is a piece of the puzzle, and you have to kind of look at it on its own without trying to figure out what it means for you or within your chart. Just realize, okay, I understand how these signs are casting their aspects, so review that. And I'm going to understand how each sign is related to a chakra. You need to know that individually first before we can actually put it into the equation of reading the chart. But this is foundational material. All right, now we see here. What have I done? All I did was I took this chart and I stretched it out. I took this little box and I pulled on Cancer and Leo, and I pulled on Aquarius and Capricorn, and collapsed that space, which gave us this chart. And it's this combination here which tells us quite a few interesting things. Number one, now we can see how the chakras line up. Aquarius, Capricorn, first chakra. Pisces, Sagittarius, second chakra. Aries, Scorpio, third chakra. Taurus and Libra, fourth chakra. Gemini and Virgo, fifth chakra. Cancer and Leo, sixth chakra. So we see how that's been stretched out and lined up. Now from there, let's see here, there we go. From there, we consider a few other things. In this particular diagram, I've put in a positive and negative sign. And that's to show you the positive polarity and the negative polarity. Now, how do we determine the positive and negative polarity? Well, odd signs, meaning 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, odd signs are going to have a positive polarity. All right. Negative signs, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Let's see here. Are going to have a negative polarity. So 2, and then we go to 4, 6, 8, 10, and back to 12 again. So remember that. Positive signs, positive numbered signs have a positive polarity. Negative numbered signs have a negative polarity. All right, we've got that. Now, one of the other fascinating things, I remember particularly keying in on this when I read Yavana Jataka. It essentially said that the entire zodiac is ruled over by the sun. The sun is the lord of the zodiac, which makes sense because it's the sun's path through the sky which creates the zodiac. So you follow this? We would not have a zodiac if there was no sun. So therefore, it's been said that the sun is the king, the lord of the zodiac. And the moon is the queen of the zodiac. So they are the two rulers of the zodiac. The sun rules over the zodiac as we know it with all 12 signs. The moon rules over what we would call the lunar zodiac, or the 27 nakshatras. So one deals with the concrete form manifestation in the world, the sun-ruled zodiac of 12 signs. The other, the moon, the lunar zodiac, rules over our experiences, our perceptions, our feelings. Again, a more lunar state, which is the nakshatras. And that's why the nakshatra dashas, when we get to those of you who don't know, the dashas are planetary cycles that we all go through. They're based on the position of the moon within your chart. And so it's the Vimshottari Nakshatra dashas. The Vimshottari dasha system is a nakshatra-based dasha, which is going to show how are you going to feel about what's happening in your life. What are the things that you are experiencing? Because again, you can have a wonderful job but feel terrible about it. Or you can have no job and feel like everything's going great. And that's going to be based on what's going on with the nakshatra dasha. But whether you have a job or not is based on the Rashi dashas, which are sun-based. Why? Because the sun creates the Rashis, right? As we've discussed, it is the movement of the sun through the sky, which marks off the position of the Rashis. Every 30 degrees the sun moves, it creates a Rashi. So we see that it is the sun which gives us the things, the actual things. Do you have a silver flute or not? The moon gives us our experience, our personal consciousness of do you enjoy that silver flute or not? So the sun and the moon rule over the zodiac. And the sun and the moon also play a crucial role in the zodiac. It is the moon which is ruling over all of the negative signs, the passive signs, the feminine signs. The sun rules over all the positive signs, the positive polarity signs, the masculine signs, the odd-numbered signs. So one of the things that you can actually do is based on the state of the sun or the moon, that's going to give you some indications, just generally speaking, on everything that we've discussed about the signs so far, what they're dealing with, what they represent for you. Are they going to be supported? The better off the moon is in your chart, the better off these passive signs are going to be as a foundation. The more difficulty your moon has, the more difficulty you're going to have working with these passive signs within your chart. Which makes a lot of sense if you, again, contemplate it. Think about it. If the moon is having difficulties within the chart, it's afflicted or it's in bad dignity, well, Cancer rules over our emotional security. So if your moon is afflicted, how emotionally secure do you think you're going to be? Taurus is a passive sign. Taurus is the place where the moon is in Mula Trikona, exaltation. And Taurus deals with responsibilities, but it's also a receptive sign. So how much can you accept? The better off your moon is, the more good things you can accept in your life. So that will reflect on the issues of Taurus. Same thing with Pisces, for example. Pisces is a negative sign. Pisces is that capacity to let go and to trust and to be in a receptive state. Again, when you are in a safe place and creativity is meant to flow, or you're just there to purely to experience something in its purest form, you can't do that if the moon is afflicted, because the moon will become worried and the moon will become anxious and the moon won't be able to be there fully present. So we see that by looking at the moon, since the moon rules over, is essentially the ultimate lord of these passive signs, it's going to give us indications in regards to how well are we integrating these signs, which are, again, related to our chakra system. Same thing for the sun. The better off the sun is, the better off our Leo will be. And that's obvious because the sun rules over Leo. Our capacity to lead, our capacity for self-sacrifice, our capacity to take care of a larger community. The better off will be our Gemini, which is also a positive polarity sign, which is how well can we express our ideas with confidence without doing it because we really don't believe in what we're saying and we're trying to prove it to other people, or because we doubt what we're saying and we're trying to prove it, but we actually have learned and know, and now we can express these things. So these are all important things to be considering as you consider the chakras to the signs, the lords, such as the moon and the sun, over each sign. But what it also goes on to say further in the Yavana Jataka is that even though the sun and the moon are essentially the lords of the zodiac, that they delegate their power to the other planets. And that makes sense. The king and the queen, they are the rulers, but they can't do everything. So they have people that they delegate tasks to, like Mars, the general, or Jupiter, the minister, or Venus, the priest, things of this nature. So that's why planets rule over signs. But ultimately what they are, they're just stewards of those signs. They're stewards of those signs. So they gain their power from the sun and the moon. If it wasn't because of the sun and the moon, we would not have this zodiac. And therefore we would not have any chakras or signs or areas of life to be stewarded over by these other planets. So this is why when you're assessing a chart, looking at the sun, looking at the moon is really of paramount importance in the very beginning. And then we start moving on to looking at the individual nature of the stewards of the signs, such as Mercury for Gemini and Virgo, and Venus for Taurus and Libra, and so on. So this chart stretches out the one we were just looking at, and it shows you the direct correlation between the signs to the chakras, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it shows the polarity of each sign, which would represent that polarity of the chakra, meaning Cancer is the negative feminine polarity of the spiritual eye center. Leo is the positive masculine polarity of the spiritual eye center. Gemini is the positive polarity of the throat chakra. Virgo is the negative polarity of the throat chakra, and so on. And it indicates the primary rulers of each chakra. Now, I didn't rotate this. What I wanted to do was kind of flip this up so it was straight up and down, so we could imagine it as though a person sitting up straight, and this being the spiritual eye, and this being the root chakra. But let's just pretend this is a person taking a nap, and they're lying down. And so here we have the first chakra moving all the way up to the sixth chakra. Now, what does this show us? Well, we already discussed how when the sun moves through the sky, as it ascends up from the South Pole to the North Pole, it's moving from Capricorn up to the sixth chakra, and then it comes back down from Cancer down to Capricorn. Now, looking at this means that when the sun enters the negative polarity of the first chakra, that is when winter in the northern hemisphere starts. But it's at this point where the sun starts moving northward again. And as it moves northward, it's going to go through from Capricorn to Aquarius, to Pisces, to Aries, to Taurus, to Gemini, to Cancer. And once it gets to Cancer, though, that's when it's going to start circulating back down the spine. So we see there's kind of like a loop here, almost like a yin-yang, where we start at this bottom section, we come up around, and we get to the very top, and it starts to come back around again. This is the pathway of the energy through a person's spine as the year progresses. It's also the pathway of the energy through a person's spine when they practice pranayama techniques like sushumna breathing that circulate life force through the spine to bring energy and attention to the spine. So again, that means that every time you bring awareness to your spine and you practice some kind of meditation technique that circulates life force through the spine, you are essentially directing your inner sun, your inner consciousness, your inner awareness through the zodiac within you, bringing awareness to it. And if there are planets in any of these signs, you will be aware of any of the karmas that are collected there, and then through your choice, you can learn to release yourself from attachment to those karmas. That's the ideal, that's the goal. But now let's think about it a little bit more deeply here. Okay. Now, when you begin a practice, the energy is starting in the passive or the negative position in the spine of the root chakra, which can be attributed to the back the back portion of the chakra. So if you have a front, which is the positive, and a back, so that's the back of your body, the positive is the front of your body. So what happens when the sun goes through this zodiac, and when you circulate life force through this zodiac? Well, it starts in the negative, the root chakra, then it comes up to the positive, which is the front part of the body. It circles back to the back of the second chakra, the negative portion. It comes back around again to the front part of the body in the third chakra, and then to the back, to the heart chakra, to the front again into the throat chakra, and then to the rear part of the brain in the spiritual eye center. And then it comes up around over the head, if we're thinking about it in regards to circulating life force through the spine. And now it's in the front portion of the brain, of the sixth chakra, back to the back of the neck in the fifth chakra, the heart in the fourth chakra, the front, the back of the third chakra, so lower back, and then the front of the second chakra, so the front part of the body in the second chakra, until we come back around again where it circulates to the rear portion of the first chakra. And this can be looked at in other ways too. It can also be the left and right sides, whereas the negative is the left side, the right is the positive side. But if you would overlap the front and back and left and right, you would essentially get a spiral pattern, which we know, if you've studied any kind of yogic text, that the sushumna is in the center of the body, and then there is the solar and lunar channels which circulate around positive and negative polarities up through the spine. So this is a great representation. And so the energy is going to snake up through the body and then snake back down through the body. Now, let's get back to this. So what would this look like? All right. So we're going to assume that let's assume that this person is looking straight ahead, meaning you're looking at the back of them. All right. So this is not the front of the person, this is the back of the person. And if we're going to look at this in regards to the left and right side, or the negative and positive, well then we're going to start over here on the left. That's where the energy starts. And then it's going to go from Capricorn over to Aquarius, and then it's going to go up to Pisces, and then Aries, and then Taurus, and then Gemini, and then Cancer. It's going to come around Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, until we get back to Capricorn. All right, so did you see how that moved in that spiral pattern up through the chakras and then came back down in the same fashion? And that is related to the polarities of the zodiac signs. And again, relates to how the energy ascends up and down through our bodies as the sun moves from tropical Capricorn up through to tropical Cancer and back down to Capricorn again. So that's the Uttarayana, or the northern path of the sun, when it's moving north. And then it's Dakshinayana, when it's moving from the north back down. So again, we see that the body is a representation of the earth as it's related to the sun. Okay. Now these are all things to consider when you are watching, thinking through the movement of the sun through the zodiac as it relates to the chakras of the body. Now, this is all fairly technical, and you might have to sit with it, think about it for a while, and it might not even be clear in regards to how you're supposed to apply this at this point in time. But you have to get this information first in your mind, in your consciousness. And in our next class video installation, we will look at each of the signs, and we will talk about how these signs are related to the movement of the sun in that sign. You know, for example, when we think about Aries being the third chakra, well, it makes sense that Aries being the third chakra, it's the positive aspect. So it's the front part of the chakra. That's where you're charging forward. You're getting things. You're making things happen. You're taking initiative. You're getting things done. That is represented by the masculine aspect of this third chakra. But we have to remember there's a feminine aspect too, which would be indicated typically by the left side or the back part of the third chakra. And what is Scorpio about? Well, Scorpio is about internalizing, learning the lessons of the activity that has been accomplished. All right. And so that's why when we have a Scorpio ascendant individual, they're still ruled by Mars, and they're still going to have Martian qualities, but they're going to be the more thoughtful person. They're going to be the more internalized, contemplative person, which is weighing out, reviewing, the activities that they have engaged in within their life. So each of these chakras has the same kind of thing. And this is just a brief indication of why the zodiac is not related to the seasons so much in the way we think of them as autumn and fall and summer and winter and these sorts of things. It is related to the movement of the sun to the earth, but not seasonally, but based on how the sun is stimulating the different levels of the earth and the chakras within the earth, and how it relates to our own particular, resonates with our own particular energy centers and energy fields. Okay, well, hopefully now you understand why the zodiac, or I should say how the zodiac is related to the chakras, and why this is so important from a level of personal development, why this is so important from a level of yogic understanding. And hopefully it will also give you insights, if you contemplate it deeply, in regards to how the solar system is reflected in all of our individual experiences, which is really what the issues of astrology are all about. They're about learning to see what is a person's experience, because we know not everyone has the same experience. People have radically different experiences. Even people born within 2 minutes of each other have radically different experiences. And those different experiences are based on the finer divisional charts, also the places that people live in, because what we have to remember is that, again, once you are born, you're not just staying in the place of your birth. You're going home. You're moving to California. You're moving to Germany. You're doing all these different things. And even if we have twins, never at any point in time are they ever actually within the exact same space. They can be pretty darn close. But think about it. Twins who have radically different experiences. One lives in New Mexico. The other lives in Florida. Well, when you're in a different point of the planet, those planetary energies are hitting you differently. This is the basis of astrocartography. All right. I personally don't get too much into astrocartography because I think your karma is pretty much going to follow you wherever you go, as reflected through your finer Vargas and divisional charts. But there is something to be said for being at a different point on the planet, because that's going to indicate how the planetary rays are hitting you from a different angle, which can trigger, stimulate, again, metaphorically, different aspects of your karma. And this is very important to remember. And this is why everyone has different experiences, even when they're born very close together. Or it's also why people born miles apart, who maybe live in the same area, experience similar boons or similar traumatic events, because in that area, that's where the planetary rays are hitting in a certain way, and anyone within that area that are particularly receptive to that is going to feel the brunt of it. All right. Now, again, let me return to my earlier point of saying that astrology, I don't want it to be fatalistic. And I say that as though, I'm hoping it's not fatalistic. That's not what I mean. I would like to see it move from fatalism to an understanding of trends and bring in that freedom, that realization that you are not a slave. You're a slave as long as you let yourself be one. And that through awareness, through making choices, through changing your direction, you can become aware of those karmas, as the astrologer shares with you. But having that knowledge, now you do something with it. This is the dilemma of a lot of astrologers. people come to them and say, okay, tell me about my astrology. Assuming that, by them knowing that, all of a sudden their problems are going to go away. And it doesn't work that way. More than likely you already know about your problems. So what the astrologer can do is bring more awareness to them, but you still have to admit that that is the case and then decide, how am I going to work differently? How am I going to, now that I know this, now that I'm going in that direction, how am I going to turn the wheel a little bit so I go in a different direction? Now we also have to remember that just because you become aware of your karma and you become more self-knowledgeable and you make changes, it doesn't mean you're going to be successful. It doesn't mean you're going to be successful. But you're going to be a heck of a lot more successful if you actually try. You know, again, not that I promote wars, but think about it. If a soldier goes into battle, you know, but he's not going to go unless he knows he's going to come home. No one's ever going to go to war and countries will be taken over all the time. But the soldier says, I'm going to do my best. Even if I fail, I'm going to do my best. And that contributes to the greater cause. Again, not promoting war here, just an example. So for you, this isn't about providing, astrology is not about providing for you certainty. There is no certainty in this world. I'm just telling you that right now. It's about giving you a map so that you can say, all right, this is my adventure. I might fall into a pit that I can't see or that the astrologer missed. But I know to avoid that canyon over there filled with snakes. And I'm still going to try to do my best to navigate this path so that at least I gave my adventure the best shot possible, right? And that's how you work within this life, because you need to live. You need to be alive. If you're always consulting astrologers, or you can't make a choice without consulting an astrologer, you are living in fear and you are kind of dead inside, I think. Now, if you are able to live your life and you have self-knowledge, you know yourself, but every now and then you just can't figure something else out, well, sure, go to an astrologer. That's what professionals are for. That's why you have doctors. That's why you have financial advisors. You know, because you can't go to school for everything. And sometimes you just need a little bit of advice to guide you in the right direction. And this is the role of an astrologer, to provide this kind of insight, not to live your life for you, not to give you any kind of certainty at all, but to give you the best advice possible, the best guidance possible, so that you can live your adventure, so that you can be alive, so that you can integrate all those things that you're meant to integrate within this lifetime. And all of this is going to be reflected within the birth chart. It's going to be reflected in detail in relationship to the state of the chakras, through the Rossi aspects, the planetary aspects. And then we can use things like transits and dashas, Lajatadya Vashtas, Shainadya Vashtas, Jaimini techniques, Rashi dashas, whatever it might be, to give us deeper insights when it's necessary. And so this is the fascinating aspect of astrology, and this is why a proper understanding of the signs in relationship to how they actually function, how they relate to the chakras, is necessary. So we'll move on next week within our Rashis and signs class, looking at the things that the Rashis rule over based on Yavana Jataka. We'll also be getting into the body parts related to the Rashis, as well as taking that into the Drekana, because the Drekana is specifically related to physical aspects of the body. And then ideally, before we finish up this semester, we'll take some time to look at the Navamsha and potentially the Dasamsha as well, just to see how each sign is a prism reflecting all these different bits of information, and that by having a planet in a particular point, it's not just a planet in Aries, it's a planet in a point in Aries, which is reflected prismatically throughout all the Vargas to give you more details into how that planet is going to work within every area of your life, not just the path. Remembering that the Rashi chart itself, the main birth chart itself, is actually a person's path, the experiences they're going to get involved with, more of the concrete things. Which is why the signs, they're said to be the unconscious body of Vishnu. They're the things. And the planets are related to how our mind, our awareness actually works with and navigates through those fields, as we've discussed. Okay, so be well, and we'll catch up next week.